Welcome, everyone. Hi, Pat.
Can't believe I made it.
I haven't seen so many of you in a long time. We'll let a few more people join in and then we'll get started here in a few minutes.
Hey, Pat, can you hear me?
Yeah.
How's Chris doing?
It's incredible.
Good.
Incredible. She's breathing like she hasn't breathed in 2 years. She's talking wonderfully. I mean, everything. It's amazing.
Great.
She's all bummed out. She's got this 2-inch thing sticking out of her neck. But I mean,
You've been a pain in her neck for years, so it's probably she's used to it.
no, it's
That was
awesome.
too easy.
I'm on cloud nine. She's doing wonderful.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Now, Dave, are you sure it's a pain in the neck?
Oh,
That's a different operation.
We're not going there, Dick.
Thanks, Pat. How are you?
I'm good. I haven't been this good in 2 years.
Oh my.
3 years.
perfect.
She's totally cancer free. I mean, she won't quit talking. It's awesome.
That's terrific news.
What kind of cancer?
Throat.
All right. Should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. So welcome. My name is Jennifer Bell. I'm the OBDA president. I do have an opening statement prepared for today, so I am going to read that. Thank you to everyone who is participating in today's meeting. Whether you're here with us virtually now or submitting questions through the Google form or engaging with us in another way, I really appreciate your presence. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to all OBDA members. This roundtable is a place for everyone to ask questions, voice their opinions and concerns. We should all come to this table with the mindset to listen and to have a seek to understand attitude. My goal as the OBDA president is to support all of the members. We are here together trying to do similar things across the state and want to find better ways to improve our system and processes and develop things to support one another more. It is important for our organization to have proposals as it is a formal way for organizations to converse with one another. Additionally, it is important for organizations to create opportunities like this virtually and asynchronously so everyone can have a voice. Participants should use non-accusatory language today and be respectful throughout the meeting. We are all professionals and we need to make sure that we understand that everyone has feelings. Proposal leaders have been seeing a wide variety of feedback, some positive and some negative. And for all of us, we must make sure that we are creating an environment where we want to be on the computer together. We have also seen comments that directors like part of a proposal, but not other parts. We can discuss all aspects of each proposal today. And at this point in time, all proposals are subject to change as I, as the OBDA president, have the authority to veto any proposal. Beyond providing clarity and intent of each proposal, we hope to have an engaging and insightful conversation with our colleagues about the strengths and weaknesses of our current system. We also hope that these kinds of conversation bring more directors to the organization as members. We currently have 250 OBDA members and will continue to try to have 100% of the directors be a part of the organization and the conversation to make us the best Band Directors Association we are ever a part of. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. We're going to discuss the proposals in order, and we will start with proposal number 1, required literature. This one has been set forth by Noelle Freshner. So we will direct our questions directly to Noelle so that she may answer them if there are any available questions currently right now on proposal number 1. Noel, did you have anything to say about your proposal?
No, I just, from conversations with lots of directors and taking a look at my own program, I think COVID hit us all in a variety of ways. Some of us may have avoided playing down in the last 2 years, but some of us may be playing down in the future. So, sorry, I'm sitting outside. So, yeah, I think that this is a positive proposal, and I hope everybody agrees that we should move this way.
Can you read the proposal again, please?
Yes.
Yeah, let me find it.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. So basically, proposal number 1 is to continue what we have done for the past year, which is to play down a grade level or a list level for the year, and also impact sight reading. So sight reading would then be a level down below that. So no different than how we're operating currently.
And I know Dave, Simon's not here right now. There was questions about this year's sight reading level difficulty. Do you have information on that, Noel?
It is written in the bottom of this proposal that sight reading would be guaranteed one grade or one list level lower for sight reading, but I know that at the state contest, he followed this as the rule this year.
So he followed this current proposal's recommendation, even though it was not with it?
Yes.
Okay. There was a message in the chat.
Cancel or choose? Is it on your phone?
Can you, I don't even know where the chat is on mine now because it went away.
The chat was just that Dave and Chuck are trying to get into the meeting.
Okay.
I've got a question real
Yes.
quick for Noel. Do you have any data on how many bands actually did use literature that was lower?
Evan,
Yeah,
does-
Eben, can you share that? There we go. So Eben's sharing
Okay,
that right now. So
great.
you can see
Super.
that it was utilized, maybe not exclusively utilized, but it was utilized this year by some groups.
How do you make this bigger?
Okay, that's great.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
They're targeting military assets and critical infrastructure, but civilians are still paying the price. Okay.
Okay,
Fortunately, thank you.
Noel,
There's a couple people, I think, that have their microphones not muted. Can we make sure that people have it muted unless they're talking?
Praying for cyclone.
Hi, Pat.
That's
Chuck and
Chuck Bolton. Turn off your microphone.
I think they're trying to get their cameras on and stuff.
I can wait for Chuck.
I'm on
Okay.
somewhere.
Is this, my concern is, I totally get why we would do this in this, in this time that we're in with COVID, et cetera, because that bubble is going to be going through for a while. But to make it permanent, I wonder about that.
This is a 1-year change. It is not for permanent.
Oh, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, I believe what is happening is each year we're putting this proposal forward, and as directors find that they do not need it, they will not vote for it anymore.
Good.
Okay. Is there any other questions about proposal number 1?
I just have one. So for me, like, I wonder, because there's so many opportunities for literature selection, and to be able to have something approved that would be at the grade level recommendation, because, you might find something that's not on the list, but it's at the grade level of everything else, and then go to Dave Simon, get something approved. I'm wondering if that might be a better option than just saying, oh, everybody just look one level down on the list. Because I mean, I know my bubble's hitting next year, but you know, literature is a huge part of what we do and what fits our ensemble. So I'm wondering if just, you know, going a level down is the right call.
Evan, can you show that document that showed the data that Mary Lou was asking for? So, if I read this correctly, Evan, you can correct me. Are you done? If you look at, for example, the 6A band, 65 pieces total, 22 of 65 were, I mean, you can see where the grade level is at. So if we are, I mean, evaluating this, there are several bands that are still requesting, you know, stuff that's below their grade level. 32 bands or 32 pieces at the 6A level were grade down. So I think
But we only have to play one at the grade level, right? Like we only have to play one off of the required list, or only have one piece that is been approved. So I guess that's my concern is sorry, corgis bark. But that's my concern is like, do we need to really like be concentrating on a level down, or do we need to find music that's appropriate at our level and get it approved rather than just being like, oh, it's COVID level down. So I don't know. Cause I mean, you know, I played a grade 3 piece. My slow piece was considered a grade 3. Who has a slow piece that has a trumpet that goes to a high A? I don't know for a grade 3, but I had a grade 3 piece of music on my program, but that wasn't the one that was off the list, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that if we don't do this proposal and keep it how it's been this year, that's going to end up guiding when he does receive those requests. So most people are typically sending for request their hardest tune, their list tune for approval. So without this, he would not approve it if it wasn't at the grade level specified originally.
I'm thinking here too, correct me if I'm wrong, the data that you have on what we're seeing here, that was just off the bands at the state contest. That was the literature from the program at state this year. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mary Lou.
Okay, so then what we need to remember is we've got a great number of bands that didn't meet the qualifying standard, which means that they probably would, or at least should be playing maybe something less than what they were programming. Does that make sense? Am I making sense here? So I think we need to factor in, or at least be aware of those folks. And I totally agree with what Jen was saying. But I'm also thinking about some of those other people may not quite be at a place where they're fully aware of all the resources and where to go in terms of selecting literature. I'm thinking about some of our novice directors. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Mary Lou, those are really, really good points. Because I think that as much as we can serve a large number of schools and directors, rather than just focusing on the schools that make it to state or the schools that meet that standard, we want more to meet that standard, right? We want more to have the opportunity to make it to state. And I mean, I'm in the same boat as Noel, like, and I think Jen said that too, that like my bubble is hitting next year. Like we've been able to make it the past 2 years. I was able to pull off a grade 4 this year, but I will not be able to next year, I don't think. And so it's just, you know, like it hit our middle schools so hard, and those kids are now becoming our upperclassmen. And it's been delayed for me. And I think a lot of other directors are in that same boat that I've talked to. And so it's not that, you know, the COVID distance learning damage is over at all for me. I mean, I almost feel like it's just starting. So yeah, and I know that a lot of other people are in that same boat. So and I love what you said about like it gives resources to our younger directors, because selecting literature takes huge amounts of time to find the right thing for your band. And not everybody can do that depending on your situation. And so having a list that is like a really great list, that's just recently been updated, and it just opens up the possibilities so much for our younger and more inexperienced directors. So that's why I signed my name onto this petition, and I'm really thankful to Noel for getting the ball rolling.
And I mean, this does open the gate for, if this is voted on by the members in passing, maybe just having somebody who is really wonderful with literature being able to go to OMEA and doing a conference session with each grade level in mind, just proposing, here are some wonderful pieces that could fit tough ensembles. So, okay. Is there any other comments on?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment if I may.
Thank you, Chuck.
I see the proposals being fine. The bands that want to play harder literature can. The ones that need to play easier literature will. I see no issue whatsoever with this proposal.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to proposal number 2, sliding scale. And this was proposed by Mick Kelly. Mick, would you please read your proposal?
Sure. So this proposal removes the sliding scale from the OBDA evaluation form. Evaluations will be based on the current 6A scale. New benchmarks will be added for tape pool qualifications. Listed below are the benchmarks for qualifying scores, so it would change. The 5A and 6A would stay the same with the 75 and 70 respectively. And then 4A would go to 65, 3A would go to 60, and then 1A, 2A would go to 50 to qualify for tape pool.
Any comments so far toward this proposal? I know some of you are reading it right now.
Well, I could make a comment that if I'm on.
You are.
Okay, sorry. Got used to doing Zoom during all the COVID and haven't done it for about a year and a half. Is that when we originally started this form and the scale, the first year that we had it, we had the 6A only. And there was such an uproar from the small schools that we had to convene, and we set up the at that time it was a 4A scale because that was the big schools. So we had to set up a 3A scale and a 1A, 2A scale. So that's what's happened. We've already done just the 6A scale before, and it was very unsuccessful.
Mick, have you done any research on the numbers that you have there with the bands, to see how that would affect?
Yeah, so Eben and I took a look at the scores for the groups that were qualifying this year, and the breakdown worked out in a way where they lined up within a few points of what they would currently be on the sliding scale. So if you are a 4A band and you were required to get a 75 on the 4A scale, that would drop down and would put you right about the 65 that is on the 6A scale. So the levels indicated in the new qualifying scores would be fairly close to what is the current number that is qualifying on the current scale, if that makes sense.
Do you have that documentation to share?
Eben, I think you have it somewhere. So this is an example of the 1A and 2A. So the red is the new, what would be the new points where you'd have to average between like a 21 and a 22 in each of the sections. And then I think so that's kind of the range that would be there that we would see on the 6A scale. And so we took those numbers of the 6A, the 13 to 14 in each category, mixed with an average of like 5 and other factors to get to that score of 50.
I have a couple comments.
Thank you, Dave.
I'm looking at the rationale, and it says, talking about, excuse me, sliding scales. Marching band does have similar to a sliding scale. They have open class, A class, and their scores are judged accordingly. Also with sight reading, there's no sliding scale for sight reading evaluation, but the level of music is different for each classification.
So are you saying that we sort of already do a sliding scale because we allow different levels of music for bands?
That's correct. It would be more legitimate with this talking about no sliding scale if everybody was reading the same level of music. But for example, at state, each classification reads a different piece of music.
Did everybody in this group get a copy of the letter that David Weston sent?
We have that available. We were going to do verbal questions, and then I was going to pull up every written thing that we have on each scale.
Well, since he can't be here, maybe since what, I don't know, 15, 20 directors signed that, maybe that should be part of the discussion.
It was planned to be. Is there any other verbal questions we have or comments we have available right now?
Did I see somewhere that, sorry, Ben. Sorry.
Okay,
Go
cool.
ahead.
Okay. So I think looking at the bands that go to state as their points is the wrong direction for this. I want to look at from the middle school level in bands at the beginning of the year. So middle school bands in the second box is where they're typically at least when I grade them. So like a 14 to 16 is, kind of a respectable score that you would see regularly. They would be getting now in 5s and 6s the equivalent. So an overall score of 15 to 20 for a band, that's not what you want to, it's not the kind of message you want to give to kids. That, oh, you got a 25%. The sliding scale works. It makes sense. Kids understand it.
Well, and
it keeps everyone on equal footing.
I think one of the things from my perspective as I look at this evaluation is I come to all of this as an educator. I come to all of this as somebody who wants to be able to encourage my students to, when I look at the rubric, I talk to my students about quality of sound. I talk to them about tone and intonation, articulation. And each time, we go to play, there's something that my goal to improve. If I go to festival, and I come back saying we only got a 25% out of 100, my students aren't going to believe in what we're doing anymore. And they're not going to have faith in me as their teacher anymore. When I see the sliding scale being removed, I see it going from educational to competitive. And my philosophy, even as a 6A band director, was I'm here as their teacher. If they want to be competitive, they can go and become the best trumpet player in the world. And they can put in the time and the effort to get there. Right now, I have 250 students in my middle school program next year. My job is to teach every one of them the best I can. And when I take them to festival, if I'm coming back with scores that I don't want to tell them what they are, because our goal is to be on the right-hand side and we're on the left-hand side, I feel like that's going to take all the wind out of my sails. As a small school, when I go out and I judge as an educator, as a judge, and I'm listening to schools that are struggling at reading the literature that has been put in front of them, and I'm having to give scores that are 20 and 14 and 13 and 12 in the same festival day. My concern is how are those children going to take it? Not how is the band director going to take it? And if I'm having to give 5s and 6s to align to what my ears are hearing, I won't judge anymore because I'm an educator and I want to be setting my students and all students up for success and learning. So I'm concerned from that perspective. Well,
Thanks, Jen. So I did sign the letter that will be shared later, I guess. And I just simply want to climb on board the idea that I think all of us want this to be for students. We want to encourage students. We want to encourage long-term playing, long-term singing as a choir director also. And it's already, it's not hard. I mean, it's easy enough for me to get across the idea of what a 70 means or what a 80 means. And my 3A band is going to have a tough time, especially right now. I had 12 students in band this year, 9 horn players. And I'm not coming to this with any sour grapes at all. I'm just saying it's okay for me to be able to explain that band scoring is lower, say, than choir scoring is. And it's okay for me to tell them that, hey, everybody thinks that 70 is the qualifying standard for a 3A band. But if I start having to explain that a 60 is okay, or if I was a 1A, 2A director, a 50 is okay, and those are bands that make the state championship, that does become really tough because, you know, if a kid gets a 50 or a 60 in a class in school, they fail. And so we're giving, because of that system, we're giving the impression that our bands are failing. And man, I listen to 1A, 2A bands, I listen to 4A bands, I listen to 5 and 6A bands, I listened to a few 3A bands after we were done performing. And with the makeup of those groups, there are really well-playing bands in all of those categories. And to go to a sliding scale that makes their scores look like they're failing feels like we're failing students, with all due respect. I'm not trying to
no, I think your tone is fully acceptable. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
On the actual proposal, Russell, do you mind if I read what you wrote?
Yes, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hostile, I think, but yes, you can go ahead and
It's
read
okay.
it.
I'm going to read it just word for word, just because it is what was written. But I think the main point is the central area of the conversation here. It says,
sure.
Clearly, this proposal could only come from a high-tiered school with no clue how difficult it is to create a lower tier program, especially one that makes it to the state finals. Okay, this is where I think it's most important. 6A schools are not the same as 3A or lower. Those classifications should not be on the same scale. We aren't comparing apples to apples when we eliminate the sliding scale. This proposal is not necessary. Are any of the lower tiered schools for this? I hope not. So again, I think what I pull out of this is the 6A schools are not the same as this 3A or lower. And I think many of us agree to that. Does anyone have any comments? Mick, do you have any comments toward that?
Sure. So the intention with this, so first to Will's point, the thought behind this and the intention behind it was not to look at it as a failing grade, but more as there's a lot of room for growth, which is where some of these numbers came from. And then for the school comparison, the other thought behind it was we don't want to compare schools to schools. We want to compare it to the rubric and try and get away from looking at one school compared to another. There was another comment at one point. I don't know if it's still on the document, or maybe it was on another document at some point, but somebody was talking about at the state level, deciding at the competitive level which school could play the other school's music. And then we're looking at comparing the schools and not comparing them to the educational rubric, if that makes sense.
That was a comment on a different proposal.
So I have one quick thing. You know, I've been at Douglas for 25 years. Most people wouldn't remember that or wouldn't even know that I started at Banks High School. And with a school of 350 students, I still found my 18 minutes of music. I had long talks with Dave Mann, like how do you get these guys somewhere, and you teach them through the literature. And I used the literature list, and I had 13 kids and an alumni drummer, which I didn't know was the wrong thing. But OSA, it's past the statute of limitations, and we didn't get there. But man, when we hit a 70, and it was on the sliding scale, and so my perspective is those were my kids, and I was all in for a long time with them, and then I use the sliding scale currently with my freshman band and my middle band when we go to our cadet festivals, because they know they're not the same as the wind ensemble. I think it does take some education with the kids, but I really think that the sliding scale works. And I think that if my ninth graders were directly compared to my top band currently, I think it would be a travesty, honestly.
Mary Lou?
I think it's just good for us to remember that this rubric and the scale, it's a tool. And it's a tool, however, that we choose to use it. For Jen's group, she uses the sliding scale. In Salem Kaiser, we had used the 6A scale from everyone from junior high through high school, but everybody understood how we were going to use it. And so I think it gives us options the way that it is. So those that need the sliding scale, use the sliding scale that works for them. That's fine. But if you don't want to use it within your own school or the festivals that you create, then that's okay too. You can do that. You have the options. Where you don't, the only place where you don't have the option is if you are trying to move your band to state competition, and that's your choice. And so anyway, that's just, you know, to remember that we've got some options, and even though I never was, you know, a proponent for the sliding scale, I certainly, you know, understand the need for it. I think it would create some pretty hard feelings across the state, especially with smaller schools, because of the situation that they are in. And I would be, I guess, I would be more apt to keep it for them because of what they're dealing with.
I have some questions. I believe I'm reading this correctly. This is the questions that were put on the Google form that we sent out. It says, how was the previous system broken? Why are we insisting that a 1A band can be compared to a 6A band on the same scale? Mick, I can read it again if you'd like.
Sure. So we're not necessarily saying that the system is broken. We are trying to open conversations and look at ways to advance it forward. And perhaps this proposal is the wrong way. There's a lot of people who are bringing up a lot of valid points about how this would negatively impact schools. But when I was looking at this, and had Evan help me a lot through it as well, we were really trying to focus on how do we improve the current scale that exists, and how do we make it more clear to directors across the board and to adjudicators as well. So we're not necessarily saying it's broken, to answer that part. And then the insisting that 1A be compared to 6A, where the goal is, again, to not look at a band to band comparison, but to just look at bands against the same rubric. instead of almost treating it like it's 3 to 4 separate rubrics if we're counting the middle school, junior high with the 1A, 2A section.
I have another comment on the questions. It's quite a bit. Eben, let's see. I'm gonna try and.
Do you want me to share a screen for that?
Well, can you put it in that the question number, like on the third one down, number 4 column? Or the 4, yeah, the 4, number 4. Could you just put it on a separate document so it's easier to read? Like put it on a Word document and then share your screen. It says
sure.
removing the sliding scale.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you. And then after this, would you pull up Mr. Weston's letter? I really appreciate everybody coming to this roundtable discussion. It means a lot to the exec board. We're doing our very best to do our best for everybody. So when we see so many people here, it really does mean a lot. I'll read it unless so that you guys can. Removing a sliding scale seems like a poor idea to me. I think it is much easier to explain the sliding scale than it is to explain to a young group of musicians why they scored 30 to 40 points. Many students, and especially their parents, automatically see points out of 100% as they relate to 90 to 100 as an A, 80 to 90 as a B, and so on. The score of 30 to 40 now seems like an abject failure. I use a modified version of the current OBDA sliding scale as a guide for evaluating my own students of their performance. My district uses an 8-point proficiency-based scale, which I have appended to the top numbers at the top of the OBDA rubric. In the 8-point scale, earning a 1 to 2 is not proficient, a 3 to 4 is nearly proficient, 5 or 6 is proficient, 7 to 8 is highly proficient. I've aligned the 8-point scale with the OBDA 30-point scale as follows. I have 3 levels at my band, at my school, and grade the students in the youngest band on the 1A, 2A scale, the middle on the 3A, 4A, and the top on the 5A, 6A. The students easily grasp the concept that earning a proficient mark in the top group requires a higher standard performance than earning a proficient mark at the youngest group. In the youngest group, it is absolutely developmentally appropriate that basic tone quality concepts are developing, and that more demanding passages, difficult intervals, and harmonic structures are not performed well relative to easier passages. Performances meeting this description would earn around 14 to 16 points on the 1A, 2A scale, which would put it either into a 4 nearly proficient or 5 proficient range. This makes sense to my high school freshmen. Thank you. The sliding scale doesn't exist for competitive purposes in my mind. Rather, it exists to provide a scale that shows what is developmentally appropriate for the level of an ensemble. It is true that solo music does not have a sliding scale. However, school size has a large impact on ensemble size, which in turn has a large impact on many of the elements listed in the OBDA rubric. Individual students from schools, large or small, can perform at a wide range of skill levels, and the variables to play have much more to do with access to lessons, individual student effort, and any number of other factors. I think it would be more beneficial to discuss adding a sliding scale for orchestra and chamber music than to remove it from the band rubric. Sight reading does not have a sliding scale for scoring, but different classifications and have different sight reading material. Mick, did you want to respond to that?
It's a lot there.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's
do
okay.
Do you want us to put it back up so you can?
No, Evan sent it to me, so I have it on another monitor. I just think that a lot of there's a lot of valid points, and I don't want to dismiss any of the people who agree with it. But there's also the thought of like you want to improve your groups a lot as well. So the thought of removing the sliding scale is not necessarily to get rid of this idea of a proficiency at the 1A, 2A level, It would just change where that proficiency level is met at. So like looking at it as, and even still like with my groups, for example, when we're going to state contests early on in the year, we're getting usually like mid 50s. And my group is kind of just getting back into the competitive aspect. The director before me didn't do it for, I don't know how many years, but it was quite a long time. So competition is new to our school. And so we're used to seeing the 50s and then slowly improving and trying to get to those high 60s, low 70s. But with my students, we take a growth mindset to it, and whatever the low score is whatever it is. We read the comments and we go, okay, these are the things we can work to improve on. And maybe it's the way that I approach my kids, but the low numbers haven't really affected morale. And instead we just focus more on the comments than we do the score, and where we're at in the rubric, like we're at the top of column 2 or we're at the bottom of column 2 or wherever it is, and use that more than we use the numbers.
Is there anybody out there, Dan, Davey?
Hi. Yeah, I just, my perspective on all of this, I think it's interesting that this is coming up because I've been considering this or thinking about this for the state jazz rubrics. When I moved here in 2015, the sliding scale was new to me. It was a new idea. Where I came from in Massachusetts, we had a rubric that set the standard and all schools had to compete to that rubric. So, I taught at a high school with 11 to 1,200 students in it. And then the town over from me had 400 in it. And their jazz band kicked my butt every single competition. And, same with their wind ensemble was fantastic too. So, it's kind of an interesting thing coming in and observing it for the 8 years that I've been here. And then we've put it on the jazz rubrics as well. And then looking at coming out of high school, when students are auditioning for college, there's no sliding scale on how that audition goes, right? The expectation is the expectation, and you get in or you don't, or you place wherever you place. But there's no sliding scale that says you came from a 3A school, so here's what your expectation is versus you came from a 6A school, or life itself. And I don't know, I'm not necessarily, it sounds like I have a set opinion on this, which I'm not sure that I do, but these are just things I've been thinking about. Also, like, life doesn't have a sliding scale either. And my music theory classes, when they hand in their papers or their compositions, I don't say, well, here's your grade because you went to a 2A school, and here's your grade because you went to a 5A school either. So these are just things I've been considering. I don't know that I have yet set my mind on what's best. I feel like I'm still observing and yielding to people who have been working with this for longer. But those are just some of my reflections on all this.
Thank you.
So music isn't the only one that uses a sliding scale for different divisions. It was state track this weekend and reading all the details. The 6A through 1A all have different baseline qualifying scores for each event. Surprisingly, 6A are always faster and longer. 1A are a little bit delineated based on school size. Like, we aren't the only ones that are using this type of sliding scale.
Thank you, Ben. We've heard a lot of kind of against, a lot of concerns. Is there anybody with the opposite reaction that would like to speak up?
Jen, I'd just like to say something and kind of pose a whether a question or just a point of understanding that Dan kind of pointed out about, like, him coming from the East Coast, that they didn't use sliding scale there. I kind of went into a deep dive to look across the United States, every state band system, who used the sliding scale, who didn't, how their classifications worked. And I only came across one other state that utilized a sliding scale, and it was California CMEA Bay Area. and they used a sliding scale. And then it's kind of interesting because I think they based it on the OBDA rubric at some point. That's what it looks like. It looks really, really close. I'm not saying there aren't other festivals out there, but looking at the state system, if they have a state system, which, you know, many states don't, like Washington, that most everyone was based upon the same rubric. But many states do have different classification levels, and different requirements for literature, but only one that I saw on a state system had a sliding scale specifically.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you please post the letter that Dave sent us today or yesterday? This is from Dave Watson. The current OBDA proposal to eliminate the sliding scale for adjudication would deal a major blow to the small school programs. A 1A school with 12 kids ranging from 7th grade to 12th grade should not be compared to a 6A school with 42 kids. Audition only senior level musicians. Small schools usually have only one high school band class and have many hurdles compared to larger schools. Limited instrumentation, vastly disparate skill levels, dilapidated instruments, equipment, and geographical isolation that leads to lack of outside resources like private lessons and clinics. There is no equity in this decision. 1A, 2A schools not qualifying for state will be getting 40s. If we drop the sliding scale, 1A, 2A, who were qualifying for state with 75 to 80 on adjudication will now be getting 55 to 60. 55 out of 100 would be considered a state worthy for 1A, 2A schools. How do we logically tell our students that 55 out of 100, essentially an F, is worthy of a state performance? How do our students rationalize that without feeling demoralized? How do we as educators show our administration that we are doing worthwhile work with 55 or a 60? While we are open to making the process easier for adjudicators, this is not the answer. Creating a system where we compare our most undeserved, undervalued, and underrepresented groups to the biggest problems in the state, biggest groups in the state, is malpractice at its finest. Decisions like this are why many school directors, small school directors, do not participate in OMEA OBDA. Small schools face enough challenges as it is. Please do not create a system that devalues and demoralizes our most challenged groups in the state. We have Matthew Hill from Oakland High School. 2A signed this. Dave Weston from Bandon High School. He's also choir director 2A. Corey Tamandong from Brookings. He does band, orchestra, choir, and jazz at 3A. Jeff Sofer, South Umpqua, 3A. Russell Zegg, Nicanee, 3A. Martin Fellows from Riddle, 1A. Kayla Golka from Sisters, 3A. Hannah Abercrombie, Douglas High School from 3A. Will Fox from Westside Christian High School, 3A. Jacob Try, Pilot Rock State or School Music Director, 1A. Paul Birch, Lowell High School Band Director and Choir Director, 2A.
Jen?
Yes.
Most of those directors, Dave contacted directors just wanting to talk through this a little bit before this proposal meeting was going to air. And so he basically went to any of the 1A through, I think, 3A directors who were at the state championships this year. The mailing lists to get out to other directors in those divisions are hard to find and hard to find accuracy with. So anyway, those directors would represent, for the most part, I think, schools that actually attended the state championships with their bands.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate that bit of info.
I have a question for Mitt, because that's okay. Just really quick. Right now, the 1A, 2A band cannot actually get into the 5th column. Is that correct? So if you look at the 5 columns, like there's no way in our system currently that they can actually make it to the excellent category, like that very last one. Is that correct? The current system right now?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, because I'm looking at the rubric and it ends right before on that fourth column, but removing the sliding scale would actually allow 1A, 2A bands, and then the 3A I know kind of like pops in just a little bit. So removing the sliding scale would actually make it possible for those 1A, 2A bands to be considered in like that last column, in that fifth column. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would.
Okay. That's something I'm curious because I'm not a small school, I'm a large school. And so I've always kind of wondered how 1A, 2A bands feel about never actually being able to be considered on that top level of music, because the sliding scale that we have right now, like that fourth column is the highest you can get. You actually can't get better than that, which is to me personally, it's hard to believe that there's not a small school that could sound amazing and be in that fifth column. And so I'm curious because I'm not a small school. Like if there's anybody that has an opinion on that, I'd be really curious to know like how do you feel about that category? So like you can make it into the fourth column on our rubric, but you can't make it into the fifth as a 1A, 2A. So like that's never possible for you. And it's the way that I'm reading our current rubric is saying that small of a school will never sound as good as a 6A school. And that's something I've always just been curious about because I'm, again, not a small school and I'd love to I wonder about that.
Will, I know you're here. I'm not sure if there's anyone else either that would like to speak to that, but you as a small school director and that signed that other proposal or was a part of it, not the proposal, but the letter that Wes sent. Do you have anything to respond to that?
I can respond.
Thank you, Jeff.
So I understand what you're saying. And while I'm a 3A school, and so technically we can get into that highest category, I will say at first, when I first started teaching, I did notice that, and it did seem a bit peculiar that we couldn't, small schools, it was just assumed would never get into that category. But and I think what we're saying, what we're trying to say with the letter is that we know that there's improvements that can be made. But with this 100 point scale that we had, the idea that all of a sudden we're going to be having lots of small school bands that are scoring below 50s, we're just, I don't know how I'm going to, express that to my students, how I'm going to tell them, hey, yeah, we thought we were doing pretty good. We would get 60s and 70s. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting these lower scores. And I'm just, I realize the state qualifying standard drops with it, and I know it won't significantly impact our ability to go to state. I'm just worried about how to educationally I explain these lower scores and make students still feel good about what they're doing.
When we started this, the original version of this did not have a sliding scale. And it didn't take long to discover that we wouldn't be able to use this system if we didn't put it in. And so that's where it came from. It came from, and a lot of small school directors and were involved in letting, OBDA know that this isn't acceptable. And so that's why it's there. And it's a good thing, I think. I think it works well.
Dave, when you put the sliding scale in, what was the original intent for that small school population?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we started when we first wrote this and put it in place. It was, good tone is good tone, no matter what school you're in. And, ensemble skills are good skills. And I've heard a couple of real small schools that could get up into that easily into the fourth column. And maybe the fifth, even one particular one. So, that's possible. I've heard some pretty incredible stuff in all the places I've judged and things. So but you know, it was just to be practical. We really wanted this to get used because it was so much better. We felt this is so much better than the old. Well, that's a 1, that's a 2, that just with no, you know, other than what's in the judge's head, what they think a 1 is.
Yeah.
So we I think the first probably OMEA or OBDA or some kind of state meeting where this had been in use for a few months, and we got the message loud and clear that people weren't going to use it unless there was some kind of sliding scale. So we put it in.
And over the years as an adjudicator, have you had a lot of complaints about the sliding scale being a negative to the programs?
No, not that I've heard. Maybe there have been. I was teaching at the college level the last 30 years. So, but
Yeah.
when
But as an adjudicator,
as an adjudicator, I don't think so. And the people we brought in, those of you that don't know me, I'm the one that's hired or procured the judges for state since the thing began, almost every year. And so I've had close contact with all the judges. I pick them up at the airport usually, and I'm with them the whole time there at the state contest. And I've had no problems voiced from judges from all over the country. They think this is a good. In fact, a lot of them said, you know, this is great. I'm going to take this back to Kansas or whatever, and see if I can get this adopted in our state. So I think it's been really successful. And
have we had a lot of negative feedback from other adjudicators, from other members that are here today on the sliding scale being a negative?
Not from all the adjudicators we brought in for state.
What about the ones that are on the call today? Anybody feel like they've had negative feedback from small schools, large schools, medium-sized schools? Dave?
I have not heard of any comments or complaints about the sliding scale. If anything, it's been very positive for the smaller schools.
Thank you. Dick, anything?
I'm Bellard with Dave.
Mary Lou?
No, the problem that I had sometimes was in Salem Kaiser, our middle school directors sometimes wanted a sliding scale. but we didn't.
Yeah.
But then we did some other things to kind of mediate that a bit. I want to just say something to Aaliyah's question, because I think we kind of overlooked that a little bit. I started my career in a 1A, 2A school. And I would say the difference or the opportunity to get into that, fifth column is somewhat, it's problematic for a small school because of instrumentation. Just having enough bodies to have full, complete instrumentation to make a real characteristic ensemble sound. And I would say if you've got a 1A, 2A school that is getting into that column, then if they were mine, then I would look at, then I'm not playing enough difficult literature for them. So anyway, I hope that kind of, at least that's my take on it. Just the opportunity for complete instrumentation at a small school is more challenging than it is a larger school.
Thank you. To everyone who's commented, Eben, I'm sorry I missed you.
Yeah, I just kind of had a question. So thinking about, obviously Leah's question, but just thinking on like the 1A, 2A, 3A bands and comparing it to, I wonder if there's any kind of connection to the level of literature being played. Like when we look at the state performing groups, they're in this range right here, right basically center of the third column. But as of like looking at the state data for this year, we're looking at 1A, 2A bands, 72% of them are playing above their required literature level. And I'm not judging that or anything. I just think like, oh, if they played a little lower, would they move up in quality? I mean, that's just like, is that something? I don't know. It's just something that I was thinking about looking at this data on, oh, if all these pieces right here, I mean, you should choose literature for your group. I'm an absolute believer in that. But if the quality is in this good column, maybe lower part of good, what does it take to move into the next column? Is it playing just a little easier music? I don't know. I'm just posing that question.
See, and I'm going to come back at you at that one. I am notorious for choosing music that's always a little harder for my group because I would rather take a little bit lower score for my kids to grow. Again, I come at this as an educator, and I cannot tell you how many times I've been to a festival where Pat and Mary Lou and Dave and Dick and Dave judged me, and I could have definitely, and Chuck, and I could have definitely gone a little lower just to get a higher score, but I don't know if that's, I mean, yes, going to state's amazing and awesome. And I know we're concerned about making the score lower, but I think it's a twofold process. We are still educating kids. And if we lower the standard so we can play every note right in every little place and every articulation 100% perfect, and we don't challenge those kids to expand their range, expand their articulation styles and the sensitivity of music that they can play, then we're not doing them justice no matter what. And I don't think that is a direct, huge correlation. I don't think that's a reason to vote for this or not vote for this particular one. Chuck?
Yeah, I should have responded to Aaliyah earlier. I forget that I spent my last 3 years teaching in a 1A school, and we went to state and we placed. There's a huge difference between 6A mindset school and a 1A school or 2A. At the school I taught at, I was just happy if I had a kid with a horn in his face. At the 6A level, I wanted fine players and good literature so we could make real music. It's a totally different setup. And I don't see in most cases, unless it was a private school with a bunch of high level kids, talent wise, as well as many opportunities, I would never even be concerned about getting that fifth column. My goal was to get in the middle column and do a good job, and maybe once in a while get a little higher. But it's a different situation from a small school to a big school, completely.
All right, I'm looking at the clock, and I know that we want to talk more, but I think we need to move on. Will, I know you raised your hand. Are you okay if we move on? Okay.
It's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'll make it very brief.
Okay.
A handful of seconds, if I may. I'm at a 3A private school. I don't think that any of my current 12 band members take private lessons whatsoever. And my band just won 3A, which is neither here nor there, except to say that I'm a musician. I'm not a band teacher, you guys. I've been in education for 13 years. I don't even have a music degree. I pride myself on being a self-studied musician. And so I come at this just trying to make great music in a 3A level school with 280 students in both choir and band, and feel really good about that. And I want my kids to feel like they're achieving something. They, without a sliding scale, they might have the same results. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that my band is playing, in the 7 years I've done band, I've had 2 years, I think, where I could play full score band music. I have to play flex music even to get it out. And really, even the first proposal doesn't even address flex music. I always have to go to Dave Syme or whoever to get my stuff passed. All I'm saying is that all of these variables are just tough. I require 1 year prerequisite of playing an instrument to be in the band. I don't have a feeder school. So whoever shows up, shows up. And this year it's 12 kids. Next year, I'm losing half of that number, over half actually. I don't even know what band looks like yet next year, but I'm going to teach my students up just like all of you do and hope for the best. But I have no, there's no graduation to this band auditioned for that band. I mean, it's what we have, and that's it. And I have some horn players that are really not very good, and have a couple that are really good. Last year I had an all-state trumpet player. This year I didn't. I had a freshman trumpet player, and she did amazing because she chose to grow all year long. The variables are just complex, and that isn't to take anything away from anybody who's at 4A or 5A or 6A. It's just different. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Chuck was saying about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mick, do you have any final comments before we move on?
Sure. I just wanted to thank everybody for your comments and the level of professionality that we were able to discuss this, because I know it does impact the small schools quite a bit. That's where I started my career, was teaching at a 1A school. And there had been no band program there for 10 years before I showed up. And then all of a sudden my beginning band was a 5th and 6th grade beginning band, and we had 50 kids my second year. So I know the challenges of trying to pick music that fits for a small group. And I know you get what you get in the smaller schools. There's no secondary ensemble. I don't even have a secondary ensemble at my current school, which is 4A. So this proposal didn't come to our minds to try and target the small schools or demoralize the small schools, but was meant to more look at the opposite side of it and try and find a way to tackle the fact that there wasn't a 5th column for those small schools, and really target a way to show that there is excellence in these schools, and try and get away from the comparison of band to band and more band to rubric. So if people don't want this proposal to pass, then that's great. And I just hope that we can continue to have conversations on how can we better use the rubric, and how can we continue to adjust it and evolve it in ways that reflect the needs of every school.
Thank you. Let's move on to proposal number 3, the tape pool. Eben, would you please read your proposal?
Yes. So proposal number 3, tape pool. This proposal changes the way in which bands qualify for the tape pool from a consensus-based score between judges to a combined score. There's been a lot of conversation on this. It could be an average as well. Right now, 2 judges have to give you a qualifying score to state. In the rationale, there's an example of like when one judge is over and one judge is lower of the 2 certified judges. How do we handle that situation a little bit? And basically, if one is over, one is lower, the band doesn't qualify for the tape pool. Even if one judge is over significantly more and one judge is right below. So I'll just kind of leave this screen here, Jen, unless you want me to read this. This is just kind of the rationale rather than the proposal overview.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And so we do have some written stuff from Gary Reiler. I'd like to open it to the group first, and then we can read the comments by Gary that everybody can hear. Ben?
I'd like to start. Yeah. So I've ran just about 30 festivals in my career, middle school, high school, and jazz. And so I've entered the scores, listened to all the bands. And I can think of maybe 1 or 2 instances where I would actually need to have this in place and use it. You have 3 judges. So the time, like typically that's their stopgap where it's happening. So you just need 2. At the beginning of all my events, I talk to my judges and I'm like, hey guys, if you think you've got a band that's going to qualify, just nod to the other person to see if you're in agreement. If there's 2 people, I plead with them. I'm like, guys, if one of you is going to do it, please come to a consensus so that situation never occurs. And then when I think about all the times in those systems, like it's just adding an extra step that's not needed. Like I just cannot think of this ever being in a scenario that I've used in the past 30 events. That's it.
I have something. Yeah. So, and I think somebody commented this on the proposal too, that this hasn't, it very rarely happens where there aren't 3 adjudicators. So you have your 2 out of 3 chances to receive the qualifying scores. But I was wondering if maybe there's a way we could amend this or add it in a way where if your festival loses an adjudicator for some reason, like it happened at our Tri-Valley League Festival, where one of the adjudicators had a family emergency and couldn't be there. And so we only had 2 adjudicators for our league festival, which the schools that qualified were going to qualify and the schools that didn't weren't. There was no, like, somebody was on the fence. But maybe in a situation like that, where there would be one group that gets, like, an example of like maybe a 77 and the other adjudicator gives them a 73. Like, if the person who gives them a 73 goes, no, they didn't make it, they just outright win the discussion. It's not a question of like, we're coming to a consensus. It's the person that says no wins, sort of thing. So just if there's a situation where there are only 2 adjudicators because of an emergency, it might be nice to see something similar to this to help a school that might be on the fence.
I have judged as 2. I did one this year. There's 2 of us, as me and Tim Byan. At the beginning of it, we just talked. I'm like, hey, if we're gonna send somebody to state, let's be in agreement. He's like, yep, let's do it. So at the end of like a banded play, and I'm like feeling good. I look over, give a thumbs up. He'd give a nod, like, hey, we're on the same page. I trust our adjudicators. They know the system. They've been around a long time, and I can't imagine them putting the bands in the situation. They don't want to be in that situation. So I just don't think this is needed, and I trust our adjudicators to take care of the situations at the right moments. That's all.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Dave?
There has been times where one judge has qualified a band, other judge has not, and the other judge is on the fence going one way or the other. So the judges would talk to each other. And if there's any question, we usually decide to qualify that group and let the tape pool decide. So there is communication. I can't remember any single event that I've judged where there has been communication with the judges if there's been any questions.
Yeah, everyone I've been a part of judging, I've always had great conversation with my colleagues, in making sure we made the right decision for the group and the students. Mary Lou, you had your question? There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was getting my mic. My problem with this as it stands now is that it is possible for a group to be quote unquote qualified for state by the numbers without having the standard being met by 2 out of the 3 judges. And so to me, that makes it seem like that we're lowering the standard.
The other thing that just came to mind too is, I mean, having the 2 out of the 3 judges, it protects us from bias as well. As much as we want to be unbiased as we do this job, there have been situations where people have been, judged by family and judged by best friends and judged by enemies, and having the 2 out of the 3 allows us to be fair on all sides. So, I mean, that's just a thought that literally just came to my head. I hadn't thought about that before.
Well, and I think too that having the 2 out of 3, which really isn't what's in question here, is a good thing, because sometimes, we as judges, we might just miss it on a group. I know that's happened with me, certainly on more than one occasion. And it's nice to have your colleagues there then to be able to, converse. And it also kind of gives that consensus is you've got, 3 sets of ears, and hopefully, the panel gets it right. Even if one judge might, momentarily, not
well,
get
as well as, the rooms are different everywhere you sit.
Well, and then, I mean, even with three judges, you look at the if you guys, if you look at the string adjudication from the state band contest, I'm sorry, one guy ran the contest. You look at state solo contest where we have 3 judges. There have been many times where one person's private student has run the state contest. Even with 3 judges, it's not perfect, but doing an average to say that, you know, if you have one person that scores you way high and 2 people that score you at a 72, then you haven't met the mark at all. I mean, that's the whole thing. And that, you know, I mean, if you look at the choir side of things, that stuff's all completely convoluted, like how they get to state and what they have to do. I mean, it's pretty clean the way we have it now.
Chuck?
Just a quick comment from a totally different angle. Yeah, 3 judges seems to have worked well. If having 2 judges and use the 2 highest scores, of course, that throws away the 3rd judge that didn't think they qualified either. But if it brought more people into the tape pool, then you have to hire more tape pool people to listen. But I don't think it would bring in that many. And the OSAA has turned me down many times when I've tried to get more help in that angle. And the other part of that is that the tape pool has worked well. I mean, think about this. This contest was going almost 40 years, and every year, almost every category is full with hardly any people left in the tape pool. It's really worked well. I would hate to have 30 people in the tape pool and we accept 20 and the other 10 say, sorry, you guys aren't good enough to go. The way it's worked is almost everybody that's qualified has gotten a performance stage.
Eben, do you have anything to reply to all the comments so far?
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's insight on this and obviously historical background too. I would be interested to know, like, you know, obviously here we have it written as combined score. It could be average of the 2 judges. And I know that's what's required for band and orchestra for OSAA. Choirs required 3 certified judges. Like, would there be any kind of different feelings going on if it was an average of all 3? Like if all 3 judges averaged out, obviously certified, and if, you know, there are some festivals that there are 3 judges, but only 2 are certified. So you only take the average of the certified judges.
Can I ask why you feel an average would be better than the current system we use, which is 2 at 75 or 2 at 70?
I think to me, it was like looking at if all judges at every festival spoke to one another, then the consensus works. Assuming that everyone is listening to each other. Assuming that
in the education that we give at the adjudication teaching, when we teach adjudicators, we teach them to use the rubric and to use your ears.
Right.
Listen from your space where you're at. And then we as judges have always come together and checked with each other to make sure that we're not completely off. Like, is my side of the room really hearing 20 points lower than your side of the room? So if we're using the rubric, if we're using the adjudication training that we've been doing for years, that teaches us to use the rubric, then I'm confused as to why we need to go average and against that comment you just made.
No, I don't think that this necessarily discourages conversation. I think conversation can still happen. I just don't think it has to, like, when it comes down to the wire, when it's that close, it doesn't necessarily have to rely on the conversation. And if there was a situation that, say, 2 judges disagreed with, like, oh, I really think this band should go, and the other judges, I really think it shouldn't go, this would solve that situation. And it probably means more bands, like Chuck said.
But why does that need to be solved? Because if we're hiring, if the festival chair is hiring these judges, they're putting these 2 people are listening. These 3 people are listening. They get to decide. So why are we worried if one person judges this way and another one judges this way on this band?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
I don't understand. If you go back to your last comment, are you concerned more that one is going to judge higher and the one is going to judge lower? We're concerned about the lower judge? Because I've judged with, okay, I've judged with Chuck. Chuck and I, our numbers don't align all the time. I've judged with Mary Lou. We judged this last year together. She had one band higher than I did, and I was pretty low. And now, but the band wasn't going to qualify for state, but I went to her and I said, am I not hearing things? So we went and I talked to the other judge. Well, in my side of the room, it was totally different than what they were hearing. Right. So it's not that I was judging low. I was judging to what I heard on the rubric.
Yeah. What I'm trying to get at is, I think making sure all certified judges, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, are having equal voice to the score, the tape pool, whatever it is. Yeah, that was my intent.
Right.
So, but even what I don't understand is every contest with extremely, I only know of one contest that happened this year with 2 judges. We always have 3 judges. It's been that way for 40 years. This is a hypothetical discussion we're having. If one person qualifies a band and 2 don't, the consensus is that band doesn't qualify.
But not only that, I'll add on to that, Chuck, is that there's a reason that adjudicators get hired. And we don't go in looking at the rubric, not like this band's going to qualify for state. Like that's exactly what we're told not to do, and to go by the rubric. So Maggie. And so that's kind of the whole thing there. Sorry, I got distracted by the dog. Sorry.
Well, Mary Lou.
Well, we've got to remember here too, that 75 of that qualifying number corresponds to a set of descriptors. And if they're not making that mark, then we've moved to another column. And are we really wanting to say that we want to tell this group that they are, state qualifying when 2 judges have put them into the middle column, which is not most of the time they're getting all of the elements. That was a double negative, sorry. I hope that made sense. That's where my biggest concern lies, is that a band that 2 people have said basically are in the middle column, that they're state qualifying.
I don't have a real I don't have a real strong position on this one, except to say that in March, my band, I think we had 1 score in the 70s and a couple in the high 60s. So we're not ready. We had scheduled 2 festivals. We went to Western Oregon next. That room is really weird. No disrespect to the room, but I heard from judges, I heard from all, there were 3 judges, plus we had a 4th in the room who ended up, they cycled clinics all day, but we're the first band there. And so all 4 adjudicators heard our band. And we had 1 score that was still in the high 60s. And then we scraped into state this year, you guys. We got it 70 and a 75, I think. And we just barely scraped in. And I guess my point is we're all teaching up our students, right? And my band got better. My band got a lot better over 2 months. Still a 3A band, still struggles in there. And I don't know if this helps inform the discussion, except to say that I see the problem if you get one really big score, like we got a huge score at state and the rest of the scores were just pretty tame compared to that one. Now, all the judges were, they had the bands scored the same in their ranking, but still, there was a score in the upper 80s, and then there was a score in the mid 70s. Or even lower 70s. That's a big honking deal. I think that's where the trouble is with knowing which way to go on this, right? Is when the scores are so skewed from one another, rather than if they're just tight and it looks like everyone's pretty much agreed. I'm done.
Will, would you say that, I mean, because I agree with the state stuff, but those aren't our state trained adjudicators. Are you saying that like at your festivals, whether it was Western and the other places that you went, are you seeing the same major discrepancies?
There are some, although at Western Oregon, we went 67, 70, 75. So that's within I think everybody thinks that that's acceptable range, right? I mean, that's good. And honestly, I'd have to look up. We were high 60s and maybe one in the lower 70s. So I think even that, we went to Clackamas this year, and I think that was pretty good also for us this year.
I think it's important to, look at because we're all coming off, not all of us, that's a huge euphemism, but coming off of the state things and everybody looking at all of that. There is a difference with these people that are coming in from out of state that are getting a lot of them have seen our rubric before, but it's a whole different scenario when you're looking at the OSA side of things as we're looking at the OBDA, OMEA side of things. And so I just wanted to kind of clarify and see if that was, part of it too, because I've had amazing judges this year that have, even if I disagreed with them, at least their stuff was in line.
So Jen,
yeah,
sorry.
Just 5 seconds. I have no qualms at all with any of the judging that went on this year in the state qualifying festivals, none at all. So I was just saying that happened at the state contest, but it was pretty even and acceptable. And all the comments were spot on. I will say this. I did get a score in the 50s at Clackamas, 2 high 60s, and then a 50 something. But the comments were spot on. I didn't love the score, but the comments helped us go and improve. And that was great.
Yeah, Jen, Brooks, I just want to make sure I understand the comment you were saying, or what you were talking about between state versus the normal festivals. Were you addressing like local festivals, since those should be certified judges, it should be tighter versus the state is probably wider because those aren't our normal OBDA certified judges? Is that what you're saying?
I was asking selfishly, as part of the adjudication committee, selfishly, at all of our events, I mean, rarely do we have people that are out of state that are judging our events, from March through April. And so I was curious because some of the state adjudication was different, and often is different because these are not people that have been have a lot of everybody's trained when they come to the state festival. However, they haven't lived with the rubric and lived with the system the way a lot of us have lived with this system. And so I was curious with Will's comments, like, well, did you find major discrepancies within your adjudication with the people that have been trained through the current system? So that was my question.
Oh, got it. Thank you, Jen.
I've got a question kind of that will follow that. And it's, Evan, do you have any data to base, is this a need based on what you're finding through data, or is it more of a perceived?
Yeah, it's more of a perceived kind of thing. I wish I had data on it. And I think the only way we could get data on it is if we adjusted our judge feedback to just be something that everyone does, positive, negative, versus I know we have the new complaint process which I know that's evolving and whatnot too, but I don't know if that's, I think it would be good to have that, but I know I don't have data on that really.
I think the only way to get data on that is to have every single festival report their blind recap sheets.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Just make a quick comment, because running the state contest for 20 years, the judges' instructions at state are, we have our rubric. We want you to go by a rubric, but we have 26 A bands. They scored between 75 and 90 on an average. They seldom get above that. We need to be sure that you have the bands in the correct order. The order is far more important than the points you give them, because this is a contest at the state level. And that's when, and plus they're untrained as far as, or at least inexperienced in using the form. So that's something that I've tried to educate band directors that, yes, you may have gotten an 80 and a 75 and a 78 at your league festival, and now you're getting 70 and 68 because the judges are widening the spread because of the situation. Now, we've had some that didn't, so we tied 5 bands at this and then 4 bands at that number, which is really difficult at a contest to really delineate then a good order.
Thank you. Evan, I just have one question. Do you have evidence or concerns from band directors that have brought on this proposal?
I mean, there's been some casual conversations at like conference or whatnot, just like maybe some certain inconsistencies or what do we do in this situation? Again, I think the situation of the 2-judge thing is rare. I understand that. To me, it was just thinking about equal voice for all 3 judges rather than, or equal voice between certified judges rather than the consensus idea. That the consensus is actually in the points. Hopefully, I mean, I've judged multiple festivals and stuff the last couple of years, and every judge I've talked with the other judges. That's normal. It's great. I think it's awesome. And most of the time we're not talking numbers. Most is like up top of 3, bottom 3, top of 4, whatever, you know. And that gets us in the ballpark. But even still, there could be, you know, like, oh, this person was 3 higher and I was 1 lower. And then depending on when we wrote that score down, do we have the time to come up, talk about that and come to a consensus also, versus like, oh, as a judge, I don't actually have to worry about it because the score is out, and either we made the tape pool and then it goes to the tape pool people if it's in excess and determines, oh, they actually made it to the state contest or not, because there's that extra filter if we're in excess, just like Chuck was talking about for the state contest.
So your concern in writing this proposal was making sure each judge had a voice in someone moving to the tape pool. Trying to say it right. Sorry.
Yeah, I think probably in general, that's it. Chad's got his hand up.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking on this. Just on the competitive side at the state, I don't want to go off on a big tangent, but if we're looking at equal, if we're looking at every judge having an equal voice, it would really come down to every judge has a third of the voice. And what we're really competing for, we're competing against ourselves for that state qualifying score. So it's like we're competing, every judge knows for whatever ensembles in front of them what that score is, and every judge is aware if they, according to the rubric in front of them and the sound they're hearing, if they meet that benchmark. So really, I feel like if a judge feels the group should qualify, they're going to give a qualifying score. If they don't, they're not. So really an equal voice would be every judge gets an equal say. So that's the consensus.
I've got another question, just really quick. And Evan, have we, this would be a proposal. Oh, nope. I'm going to step back because I was thinking something else. Sorry.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock and I would like to move on to the next proposal unless someone has something to say.
Just one more. I think Chad is spot on. I mean, everybody has their say. When I judge, I do love to check in with the other adjudicators for the first couple, just to make sure that something isn't wackadoodle. But other than that, really, it's like, that's what a judge is hired to do.
Mary Lou?
I did remember what I was saying. Sorry. Have we checked with any of the orchestra people? Because have they had a chance to weigh in? Because this works for them too, would it not?
Okay. It's been on the OBDA Facebook page, but it has not been.
Yeah, it would be only to those orchestra members, which is a pretty small portion right now, that are actually members, that are sent to. Obviously, it's been posted a bunch of areas, and I think some of them have seen it, but I didn't receive any from orchestra that addressed the tape pool.
Okay. I'm just saying is if this went to OSAA, it would go nowhere unless you had the input of those folks. So that's just something to keep in, be attentive to.
Okay, thank you. All right, just keeping time here, I'm going to move us forward to the next proposal, the performance evaluation. Eben, would you please read your proposal?
Yes, and I'll share it here in the chat as well. Okay, yeah. Update and enhance the current performance evaluation system to improve the quality of assessment. This proposed rubric form is based on the language of the current rubric. Our current evaluation system has not been evaluated or updated since 2016. Prior to that, in 2011, 2007, and from the information gathered, only minor changes were made the last 2 times. And hopefully those links are coming through in the chat. There are a lot of different things in this one with regards to the rubric. Be sure to look at the hyperlinks in the proposed documents. It has a variety of documents to look at there. And then there are links to live examples of how these were used at the Liberty Festival, West Metro Concert Band Festival, Liberty High School this spring. There's Aloha, Liberty, and Hillsborough that people can look at in detail those. It should be noted for those festivals being used. And hopefully Chad will be able to talk about this. He was one of the judges. Jeff Wilson was one of the judges, and Tim Heichelheim was one of the judges as well.
Okay, so I've got a couple of things here. One is, why does this rubric not have a sliding scale attached to it? Unless I'm not understanding the proposal correctly, would passing it eliminate the sliding scale even if proposal number 2 is voted down?
Yes, so this proposal specifically reallocates the points and adds subcategories to it. So as you can see here, basically in each column, instead of looking at quality of sound as a total of 30 points, you look at 3 subcategories, and almost entirely the language is the same, with the exception of the 2 bottom columns have a little more positive and encouraging language. on the bottom two columns. But you know, obviously we've been having a lot of conversation about sliding scale, and this particular one there is no sliding scale. So this would be adopting a new rubric, you know, with the conversations that have been happening. You know, a discussion could happen of like, do we need to have 3 different rubrics? Do we have a situation that, you know, basically recreating the sliding scale with this, that, oh, this right here, can you see me drawing on
Yes.
here? Okay. Sorry. That maybe for the 3A, 4A, this is 9 and 10, right? I don't know. And then this one for the 1A, 2A, this is 9 and 10 or something, right? There are, I think those could be conversations, but having 3 rubrics, and there's not a notion of comparing the bands across that way rather than a scale, all 3 scales on one sheet. Now I do know that's like, oh, we have to print more at festivals and adjudicators have multiple things. I understand that logistically. But that could be something to look at here. But as this stands right at the moment, there is no sliding scale. Everyone's on the same rubric, utilizing the language all the way throughout and the subcategories of each thing. These categories are the things labeled in the current OBDA rubric right now. They're just given basically point values for each one. There's been discussion of like, can you separate them? Are they all together? Judges feel pretty differently about this. Some judges feel that they're all grouped together. Some of them feel that they can totally be separated. So if a judge feels like they're all together, then, and you're thinking they're the top of this good column, you can go straight down in your point 666, right, 555 or whatever. If you feel like they can be totally separated as a judge, you might be here, here, and here. You can do that, and then the total 676 is your total for the quality of sound. And there you can look at other documents here to see kind of how that looks on the page.
This was
Okay.
Can I start?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sitting here on historical documents. Right here, I have the original rubric created by, or cut and paste, Larry Graves. It's also by Dave Becker and another one. Just sitting all these documents from when OBDA was created, how things are going on. I've just been poring over them and just seeing how things happened and how they came about. I'd also like to point out one thing. The 1983 approved list of adjudicators was 12 people. And I just want to point out that Mary Lou, Chuck Bolton, and Dave Becker have now been adjudicating for our organization for 40 years. And just a huge thank you for all of the work they do. And Dick, I've seen your name in these folders a lot too. So the 4 people that are in this meeting now, I thank you for what you've done for our organization. The premise of having something new is, to me, is saying that there's something wrong or it's not working. And I just want to state that I believe in the system and I know it works. During COVID, I pulled several old recordings and feedback forms and listened to them again and went back. And a 47 in 2004 sounds like a 47 in 2020. And the comments are stable and they sound the same. And I just know that these numbers actually work. Something good things that happened this year, like when I can rely on the numbers, I know what they mean. My first festival at OSU got 47s. I did not do well. I had an excellent comments from Mary Lou, and she actually stopped kind of like talking about the what we were playing and just kind of gave me like a 10-minute lesson on here's some core issues that you need to be working on. And so we took that as law. We worked on it. And then the next festival I had Patrick Murphy gave a great clinic. Jen Bell I had one time. I trusted the clinicians. I took their feedback, and we went from 47s, and then 80 at state, our highest was an 84. I just want to say the system works. It hasn't changed. It's reliable. It makes sense. It's clear. And I don't see a need for a change for something that works so well and efficiently and has been for such a long period of time. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. I know we have neglected to hit every comment that was on those proposals on the previous ones as well. So I want to apologize to Gary Ryler, and if any, I know that we missed Gary's on the number 3, the tape pool. I'd like to open up the proposal and read some of Gary's comments on the actual document, Eben, that you have. The proposal that you have where Gary and you have had conversations. So, no, go back to this current one. I don't want to go backwards.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's my fault. I'm apologizing to that we didn't do on that last one.
Just so everyone knows, the links for these, there are comments on that. They're going to stay there. They're public. So you can see the conversations, all that's there, whether you're in this call or looking at this later, they are public. Those aren't going to go away.
Correct. So Eben did reply to these. So I'm just going to kind of go over them so that the voice is heard, and then Eben, maybe you can summarize a little bit instead of going into huge detail here. I think I'm trying to look on my own because I've got too many things. Okay, there we go. Is this the sliding scale one? No. Required, no, what the heck? All right, I'll just read up here. So I'm just gonna get old and get really close to the computer. He writes, I believe the difficulty level of music must have a consideration here. Hard to explain in this little bubble, but if 2 bands are equally across the top 3 categories, but one plays a 5, 5, and a 4, and the other plays 4, 4, 3, this should be an area where the group playing the harder music is rewarded. One quote I once heard, when there were 2 bands that they needed to choose a winner, which band would be able to play the other band's music? If this band plays harder music plurally, this section would not swing a score far enough to make a difference. And did put an answer there. Is that the only one that's on this one? Or is there more? Okay, go ahead and comment to that first one, Eben.
Sure, yeah. What I was saying here was is looking at this in a way that the judge doesn't, well, specifically to Gary's point about like the difficulty level. And I know this has been a conversation with many directors about like, does our assessment, does our evaluation rubric right now cater to just the people playing harder music or whatnot? And I had been thinking about like the assessment, regardless of grade level that you're playing, what is the quality of performance? And in this specific example, Gary talking about when one band is 5-5-4, one band is 4-4-3, which one, he used the word winner in this situation. I think the objective is like placing them in the quality of performance, regardless of the difficulty level. As you know, obviously we have difficulty benchmark or level required to make state. And I think that's a great thing as a benchmark for us to look at the top performing bands. But looking at as an assessment, whether someone's playing a grade 1 to a grade 6, it just being clear of, and this is going to other factors, I think is what Gary's digging at, is providing a little more definition and clarity there. I know some judges think.
Could you pull up the other factors so that everyone else could see it, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll use this as an example here. Okay, yeah, this is other factors. There are
It's a
three.
little hard to read because it's
Okay.
small. Can you just enlarge it and then we can shift it
Oh,
sideways? There
yeah,
we go.
yeah.
Thank you.
So the first column is literature selection, basically not proficient and proficient. The idea is that are they playing music appropriate for the ensemble in front of them? Not necessarily is it off the required list, is it at the level to make it to state? That's a different situation. That's dealing with entering the table rather than the assessment of the ensemble in front. Where, is it appropriate? Is the music too hard for them? Is it appropriate? Is the instrumentation appropriate? Are they playing this particular piece that requires basically 35 people, but it's a 20-person band? It doesn't, that's not, or whatever, so that's what this first one is, literature selection. And the objective, why, like, there was a question about why is it so low on points? And first, other factors is still a total of 10 points. That's not any different. But looking at the subcategories, literature selection is lower. Looking at it, my thought was kids don't choose the literature. They're just focused on the quality of performance. So it being such a small thing, it's more about the director in that particular moment, with the situation of, like, obviously the group has to perform it well, then the next category is stage presence and appearance. And this is not like, oh, are they all wearing dresses and tuxes, right? It's, how do they present themselves on stage, maybe confidence, those kind of things in here. And basically the 3 points go emerging, good, and excellent. The last subcategory for other factors is discipline, response to conductor. And all of these descriptors are in the current rubric, but they're not necessarily in other factors. Some of these are actually kind of scattered throughout the rubric, oddly. But other factors seem like the appropriate place. And this is 5 points because it's really dealing with, are the students doing something? Emerging 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't see the chat, Chen, so I'm not sure what people are saying in the chat.
Okay, let me open it. I see 2 new ones, so.
And this right here is an example.
Jen wrote, isn't this why we have a lit list? And then Wesley wrote, unfortunate that we are so concerned with the difficulty of the music. I believe that was when we were talking about Gary's comment. Okay.
Yeah, so the lit list, I mean, obviously is an incredible resource, and I think it's really awesome that we have it. And people should look at it not just in the sense of like, oh, we're on the edge of making it to state, I should be at this level or whatnot. But if they're not at that level, maybe say the band is required to play grade 4-ish on the list to make it to state, but the band can only really play 2.5 at a really good level. I don't think the band should be penalized for that decision in the rubric. But in the current rubric, this specifically again to other factors, that could be a factor for the judge to consider. And then the other part of that is some judges say 5 is like, oh, the average of other factors. Some judges say 7 is the average.
Any comments from the group?
Mary Lou.
Yeah, I can jump in here real quick. Don, let me start with other factors first. You'll pull it up. My thing here with this one is you really do have 2 different things in in the literature boxes. And so to only give them 1 point and the not proficient, and then there's only 1 point difference between the two, that seems a little bit low for me. The other thing I'm a little concerned about with the bottom, the discipline, most of these, because I think you pulled a lot of these, Evan, from the flexibility category in technique, I believe. At least that's what I was perceiving, but yet kind of put a slightly different spin on it here. So as I read this bottom line, it's mostly response to conductor. And honestly, as I see that as an adjudicator, that's being adjudicated already in the performance boxes above, because if they're not responding to the conductor, that's going to show up in those boxes, and doesn't need to, I don't believe, necessarily be its own 5-point block there. And I would take a different kind of a different thought when weighting the difficulty of literature, because you were saying that a band is what was the term you used? It was they weren't shoot, I can't remember now. Old brain. They were being penalized. Okay, got it. Penalized for not playing harder literature. But you could also say you're not being able to reward bands for playing more difficult literature, and recognizing the fact that that was happening. The key here is to remember that the performance level has to be the same for that to be a determining factor.
Right.
That it's not just playing, harder literature for the sake of harder literature. And watching bands improve over the years. Boy, if you looked at the lit list that we played, or that was played in that first state band contest versus what's being played now, it is definitely considerably more difficult these days. And I think part of that was because of the practice of rewarding bands who are doing well at a harder level. It all boats rise. So I kind of look at it that way. Just overall, in other factors, I think it's limiting. As the evaluation scale looks now, in other factors, and other judges jump in here too, I take that as these are possibilities that we can comment on, but we're not restricted to those. We can choose some, we can choose all, we can do something different. It's totally to this, up to the discretion of the adjudicator. And with the new rubric, that would be confining. So if there was a 1A, 2A band that I just was so impressed with the way that, parts were rescored, that it made, a piece really, really work for them, I might choose to give them some extra points in the other factors, because it was something that was quite striking and creative and was impressive. So anyway, those are my comments on other factors.
As I look at some of the forms I got back this year, at one certain festival that I went to, there were comments about appearance, my literature, the style of music we chose, the programming, stage presence, wearing black shoes instead of sneakers, walking quietly onto the stage. So, I mean, in the other factors, just even in one festival, it just ranges so much for me. I agree with Mary Lou on pretty much everything she said with this one. Dave?
I'm coming from a different point, and I also agree with everything what Mary Lou said. But when you're adjudicating these contests, the bands come so quick. right after each other. And if we're going to be making comments, like ending comments to the bands, and then writing in some notes to the groups, and then putting in the scores, if we have all those different rubric or different scoring boxes, we're going to run out of time. We already ran out of time. I've been many times looking at each other and going, wait, just give us a couple more minutes. Having this new rubric would put a lot more pressure on the adjudicators to try to get a lot of information and numbers down, and maybe not have a chance to go back and compare that score with a band that was 4 or 5 bands ago. It's just a time allotment, I think, is the biggest issue here, in my opinion.
Evan,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
is this green one?
So, well, yeah. I think that's an interesting comment, Dave. About the time factor. This particular one that we're looking at right now is this is a specific example. Again, there's other ones linked in the document, but this is Aloha High School. This is the digital version of Chad Davies' performance evaluation at this one. And maybe Chad can give a little insight using this, what he experienced. I know hearing from the other judges, they really liked this. And at first, when it on first glance is like, oh, we have to think about multiple things. But most of the feedback that I did receive was that it was actually faster to determine where people landed here versus thinking about like if we look at here, I know the way that I was more trained in this is like, oh, I'm gonna kind of think about tone quality and put a line or put a dot or something and kind of gauge where people are at on average. And if it's 6.8, that's about 16. That's kind of what I've done. I don't know if everyone does that, but it's just breaking down these categories in language. So it's specific point values, and the feedback that I received, it was actually pretty fast. I think only one time it had maybe for comments taken longer on the forum. Chad, can you maybe talk about this since you've used it a little bit?
Yeah, you know, it was kind of hard. So the festival that we did was a cadet band festival, and there was no minimum time limit. So we had some groups that were playing 2 pieces that took, 8 or 9 minutes at the most. So the time crunch is a hard one to gauge. My experience with the rubric, there's a lot of similarities just in how you think about the columns and stuff, the way it's set up. I did like some of the language in the far left category. There was some minor changes to the language that I appreciated. The challenges for me looking at the rubric, and my experience as a judge, I've judged a few festivals over the years, but not a lot. So my 2 cents from using this rubric, selecting the points was pretty. The way it's set up made sense. I don't know that it laid exactly how I would have put it on the current rubric. The point spread in the middle column, with only 2 choices in each of those, is 6 points total, where on the 6A scale in the rubric that we have, I believe it's 10. So that was a little bit more challenging. Evan mentioned at the beginning, and at the beginning of this discussion, mentioned one of the concerns, and one of the concerns I had was it is really for me like so many of the subcategories are intertwined, like in intonation and tone. Those they're so intertwined that scoring them separately did cause me to think a little bit more. Uh, so there was some extra steps. For me, the represented all that I wanted to. So I do appreciate the comments that have come out around the other factors there, and I would echo those. I think there's some real positives in some of the language changes, but yeah, there were those limitations from my perspective as well.
Okay. Thank you, Chad.
Can I just ask a question? So maybe it's just because we're at 2 hours and 10 minutes. So instead of spending our time discussing the merits of something new, why do we need something new and what's wrong with going on? Like it looks like a nice rubric. It makes sense. But the implication is that what we're doing now isn't working and needs to change. Why do you think that? Evan.
Yeah. Again, as we were kind of saying in the beginning, I don't think like things are broken, right? My sense is like I want to look at every system we have, try to find data, try to things like improve things every year as time goes on. There is precedent for looking at a rubric, improving it based upon if you look at the current rubric that it's been changed 2007, 2011, 2016. To look at it and try to improve things. And this was an idea. And to me, looking at these boxes and looking at our language, that as a judge, I can basically say they are in this zone. Are they on the high side of this, on the low side of this? Move on. Are they in this zone, low side of this?
Which is exactly what we do now.
But it's completely grouping it all together rather than individual. That's the big difference in that.
So I am definitely not receptive to change in anything in my life. That's just the way I am. Something that would make more sense to me, like as far as making improvements and growing. If I was looking at the rubric that I've been looking at since I was 12, and then you took that same format and then made adjustments to that visual thing, and we had the same words, like, hey, that's what we did, the 3 changes you're talking about. We took the language in the first column and made it more positive, made it not feel like you were horrible. Then there was questions about what exactly is in the comments, and that was the next change. But they were slight adjustments over years, not a fundamental change in how it looks, how it's separated in brackets. So like if somebody sees an issue with it, I think that what makes most sense in our organization and with change is take the existing document and edit it slightly. Does that make sense, Jen?
I'm wondering, have you, I mean, I work really closely with you on a regular basis, so I'm trying to be cautious here. I hold 2 roles. I'm the president, but I'm also on the committee for adjudication. With this one in particular, my concern is that I feel like the person making this proposal would have spent time with the current committee looking. I mean, they're supposed to know this material inside and out. Going to that committee and saying, I would like to discuss and work on this, and have a discussion with the current committee, current adjudicators that are not judging cadet bands, that judge regularly. As Chad said, he used it, he can comment on it, but he doesn't judge prolifically, and really work together as a team to make a proposal that would benefit everyone. I feel like what's happened is we've made these proposals, and it sparked a lot of conversation, but it's also brought on a lot of stress, even before, like, it's just been so rushed. It's like, hey, here's a proposal. We're going to vote in 3 weeks. And it's like completely updoing everything that we're doing. And it's not really completely updoing it, but it feels like it because there hasn't been a conversation with the team that we as executive officers are saying, you are in charge of this portion of what we do for OBDA and you're doing this portion. And we're not really using our teams well. We're not really working together. So I don't even know what I want to say. I don't really have a question. I'm just going off of what Ben is, his frustrations that he's sharing. And my main concern is that I know that we are now over 2 hours. And I think that's more than what we had planned for this meeting. A lot of people have commented. I do need to get some information out here. Todd Zimbelman emailed me. He feels that there are too many subcategories and division of points. As a judge, I'd be forced more onto the rubric and subcategories and the performance of the ensemble on stage. These subcategories are most often intertwined, and to separate them would be problematic. So that is from Todd. I did forget to read his tape pool. He does feel unless there was a shortage of judges and there were not 3, this might perhaps be something we would consider. I would recommend that these ensembles attend more festivals. As frustrating as it can be to receive 1 high score and 2 non-qualifying score, the system works. Proposal number 2, he does not see, and that's a sliding scale, any merit or value in making the changes. Proposal number 1, he feels that playing down a level is fine for now. I would say 2 or 3 more years would be appropriate for most. The worst has not been reached just yet. Whatever makes band program as successful as possible during these rebuilding years is great. So with everything that has come at us as over these proposals, is there any last comments that the members would like to bring up? Proposers, anybody would like to say anything else? This is recorded. It will be going to other members. So if you do have a point that you would feel is really important to get out, I encourage you to do that now. Mary Lou.
I just want to say that in looking at this rubric, if you haven't taken a deep dive in, I'll save you some time and just say that's pretty much verbatim from column 3, 4, and 5 are the same way that they are, with the exception of under facility, the concentration pieces were removed, and then in the bottom of the dynamics under musicality was omitted for players usually respond to conductor, and that was put into the other factors. So that's the way it is. So the biggest changes here are in those columns 1 and 2. I have a bit of a concern just because some of the intent, I think, of the original language has been changed slightly because it appears that, trying to make things concise, which is a good thing for sure. But I think in a couple of the cases, I just think we just need to take a look at that word stuff. There's a couple of grammatical things, so it's not quite ready to go to press. But hopefully that will help you kind of work through that, so you don't have to spend a lot of time in columns 3, 4, 5. But do take a look at those areas of change, because at this point, I would be reluctant to accept it as is. And I too would have some difficulty. I think in terms of training our adjudicators, we would have to go back and do some retraining because of having to work the numbers and the subcaptions is going to mean that we will have to listen differently and kind of retool the way that we approach how we are judging and how that would fit into the scheme of things. Will be something that needs to be would have to be thought through.
Yeah, Evan, there's Noel put something in the chat. Would you please respond to that, Chuck?
One of the things that I was concerned about, we consider our festivals to be educational activities for the director and the students. And with 12 caption areas, instead of talking on a recorder, talking about some philosophical or fundamentals or whatever that might be, I probably wouldn't do that because I have 12 things I've got to check off and figure out in little boxes. And so that would be a retraining of the adjudicators. You can't talk on the recorder and give more information because you got to fill out the form. And for something like this to pass, even who else used it? You said 2 festivals used it. Who were the other 3 judges?
Chad, Jeff Wilson, and Tim Heiklein
No, that
were
was
the
at one
judges.
festival. You said it was at 2 festivals it was used. Who were the? You said the Liberty. You said
That was the Liberty Festival.
So there's only one festival that was used.
West Metro Concert Band Festival at Liberty.
Okay, because before in reading your stuff, you said it was used at several festivals, and that's why I was wondering who the other judges were. Anyway, I think it's tough. And by the way, Mr. Elliott, you have not made a comment yet. You're one of the most experienced ones here.
Well, if I can, I do have a couple of comments I'd like to make. I'm going to go back to what Mr. Mathis said earlier about a time factor and having to go back and check on what you said. Actually, what we're doing is kind of combining 2 different things into the other factor thing. When we're talking about choice of literature, when we're talking about appearance, that is, I understand. Yes. Here's the point I'd like to make. We as adjudicators, when we fill out the major 3 categories of technique and musicality, when we fill those out, then we look at that point total, then we look at the other factor points. That's when the 3 of us as adjudicators might get together and say, let's consider if this band is going to be qualified to go to state or not. Then the other factors becomes a major factor. It does. And I understand that what we're proposing maybe would eliminate that kind of discussion, but at the same time, that discussion would consider whether or not a group is going to qualify for state. So it's kind of I see it as kind of a two-sided sword here. It's a matter of, I think, discussion amongst the adjudicators. It's a matter of communication. It's a matter of how so many issues have been brought forward tonight that are, gosh, I'm so old I can't think of what I'm trying to say, but I don't necessarily agree with the new rubric for other factors. I think we're doing fine. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because that's going to come to a vote of the group.
Any last comments? I want to thank everyone for being so professional tonight. These proposals are near and dear to some of us. Some of us have built this whole system, and having somebody come in and proposing that we change it and adjust it and modify it, and really it could feel very uncomfortable. And the way that the members have handled themselves tonight makes me very proud. I will consider looking at all of these and making sure that we make the best choice for us moving forward. You will be getting Eben, when is the voting coming out? Is that in a week?
No, I think we have like 2 weeks. June 11th to
June
17th is voting week, whatever you decide of like things that go to the ballot. And those will
Yes.
be sent out to active OBDA members. Okay.
I would encourage anybody to email me any more thoughts that you have. I do hold the right to be able to decide which of these 4 proposals go to vote for membership. So if there is anything else that you need to add that you would like to comment directly to me, I would really appreciate your thoughts. I want to do what's best for everybody. So whether it's small school, large school, adjudication committee adjudicators, festival chairs, just all of you. I want you to really consider either commenting on the documents or emailing me to make sure that I make the best decision for all of us. If there's any further comments, go ahead and stick them in the chat. Otherwise, get back to your families and your weekend. And any of you who have served, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. And I will see you very soon. Thank you.